Good evening, everyone. This is your host and co-host of Intimate Talk Live broadcast. We experienced some difficulties last week with trying to bring on my co-host, and I guess Facebook changed their interface settings to where Derek was unable to be plugged in. And we've been working very hard since then to try and build a platform to where we would both be able to come on live. He's still working on it, so he may be able to pop on, but we want to go forward with tonight's broadcast anyway. And we want to ask you to share tonight's broadcast. It is an interactive broadcast. You can post comments, you can ask questions. I don't know, once again, if my co-host Derek Walker is going to be able to come on live, but he will definitely be online and will be able to respond. I just also want to say immediately that if you have not purchased a copy of my book, The Intimate Place, My God, My Man, Myself, that you can purchase it from my website, which is in the link here. And it is currently at half price. So my book normally goes for $9.99, and it's been cut down to half price to $5. So I am typing in the information for those of you who would like to purchase a copy of The Intimate Place, My God, My Man, Myself. And once again, it is on sale this week at half price. Oh, that is my co-host trying to call me during the broadcast. I'm not sure how that happened. So let me just send him a text message because he's trying to come on live. He's calling me through Skype, and I can't use the camera on two different platforms. So if you would just bear with me one moment, but I also want to just reiterate tonight's topic of discussion is how do you define intimacy? All right. So I want you to think about my question before we get into the broadcast. And I'm looking for more interaction tonight from my audience. I want you guys to ask questions or just post your comments, share your personal experiences as much as you would like to. Because I don't want the broadcast to be one-sided. So once again, just give me a moment. I'm just trying to respond to Derek because he's trying to contact me through Skype, and I can't answer Skype and do the live broadcast. To Skype and the live because it's using the same camera. So hopefully he'll get my message. All right, so I can't see who's online at the moment, but I just want to thank you for those of you who are online. I truly thank you for plugging into Intimate Talk tonight. So my question that we're asking tonight is, how do you define intimacy? And I think that's one of the hardest things, or it can be a hard question to answer, because many of us, we know what we like, we know what we want, but when we're asked to give more details or to be more specific, like, how do you define intimacy? In my book, I give you some tips on how to define it and how to be successful. But to have you to explain it, you may find it, I never thought of it that way, but I know what I like when it comes to intimacy. And I believe this is part of where the disconnect comes with some of our relationships. We know what we're thinking about a particular subject. We know how we feel about a particular subject. But when we're asked to elaborate or to communicate it, That's where a lot of us get stumped. And I'm sure for a lot of people who would, oh my goodness, I'm sorry. Derek, I'm live. Derek? Yeah, I'm live. You want me to just keep you on the phone and then you can? Okay. So turn the volume down on your computer because it's coming through. All right. Sorry about that. So when it comes to us having to explain, you know, how we define intimacy, a lot of us may find it difficult to do so. Once again, we know in our minds what intimacy is for us. We know how we feel about intimacy, but I want us to get to the point of being able to express, how do we define intimacy? Now, I want each and every one of us to understand tonight that defining intimacy, you can't compare it to how someone else defines intimacy, because that's how they are able to define intimacy. Don't compare yourself and say, oh, well, that's how they define intimacy, because that's what they want. That's their preference. So you have to define your intimacy based on your own personal preference. Derek, what do you have to say about that?
Well, it's been interesting.
Hold on.
All week I've had this discussion with several people about intimacy. And it is very interesting that amongst us, especially the African American community, we have gotten away from what intimacy really means. And when I say that relates back to, back in the day where, our African American families were more united. Men don't know how to love their spouse or significant other, or don't know how to appreciate being in a relationship because they have not been taught the proper way of being intimate in a relationship. So, I mean, this is actually a great topic, especially with intimacy, because it's getting back to the grassroots of what intimacy should be.
And so for those of you who are just turning in and are unfamiliar with my book, we're talking about intimacy. And in my book, I address a number of issues with intimacy or with being intimate, because society has taught us over a few generations or a number of generations that intimacy only equates to sexual interactions, when that's not the case. And in my book, I share how intimacy existed far before sex even came into play between Adam and Eve. And so my desire for this broadcast is to bring us all back into a conscious state, to get us back to a point of being intentional and not shying away from when you and your mate or your significant other is alone. Don't be afraid to say to them, whether it's the man to the woman or the woman to the man, that I want to be intimate. And so last week, and I hope that you go back and watch last week's replay, is that I talked about unconscious intimacy, how many of us have unconscious moments or experiences of intimacy. We don't identify it as intimacy. We just identify it as, oh, I just had a conversation with someone while I was on the bus, or I just had a conversation with somebody while I was in the line at the store or at the movies or wherever. But I want us to become more conscious, because intimacy is who we are. It's in our DNA. And many of us, let's be real, this is a grown-up show. Many of us have struggled in our relationships because of our perspective or perception of what intimacy is. And so we don't identify it as such. We just say, oh, I had a good time, and leave it at that. But I want us to start identifying every moment, every interaction, every conversation, every experience. I want us to get to the point of being conscious about it. And I want us to get bold about saying, yeah, I had an intimate moment with my girlfriend. And I'm not talking about that kind of a girlfriend, because I grew up in the age where your best friend, we called each other girlfriend, and we weren't in that kind of a relationship. So I'm not talking about necessarily that kind of relationship. I'm just saying that when my best friend and I, when we hung out together, we didn't identify it as a time of intimacy, because even as Derek said, and Derek, I'm going to let you chime in, is that we weren't brought up to talk about our relationships in that manner.
I think one of the key things, Nadella, and you hit on a great thing. Intimacy is not sex. A lot of people think that intimacy is sex or how you perform in sexual acts. That's not intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
Intimacy is getting to know the person that you're involved with.
Yes.
And that person should be able to come talk to you unconditionally about anything. And if that person knows you intimately, then they'll know when something is wrong or something just doesn't feel right with you.
Exactly.
And so I have to say that we have gotten away from it because our younger generation have felt that intimacy is sex.
Yes.
And that's why we have so many broken homes or broken marriages or broken relationships, because we don't know the true definition, or they have not learned the true definition of intimacy.
Exactly. And the thing of it is that many of them want to experience it, but they're not able to identify that what they're desiring to experience is really intimacy. Derek?
Yes, I'm here.
I was making room if you wanted to come back and say something. So once again, we have, and not even just this younger generation, we have many people who they want to experience intimacy, but they don't know how to identify that as intimacy. And so this is why tonight's broadcast is, how do you define intimacy? It's time that we start identifying and say that, yes, this is intimacy, or this is an intimate moment. And my ultimate goal as we continue with our broadcast and even move on to other subjects is to get us to once again start being conscious, start being intentional about our actions, about our behaviors, and about our experiences, and also not leave it into the hands of someone else to make sure that we have that experience. But it's really our responsibility to make sure that we have that experience as well.
And I think, Nadella, to add to that, something just came to my mind,
Mm-hmm.
and it pretty much, sex is not always love.
Yes.
Just because the way a person physically touch you or make you feel doesn't mean it's intimate and that it's love.
Exactly.
It's just something that you're seeking for the time being, but after it's done and over with, you're back in the same situation.
Yes.
And so, in saying that, intimacy starts with yourself.
It does.
A lot of times we go looking for intimacy from somebody else, but first we have to love and be intimate with ourselves.
Absolutely.
You run to the doctors, and the doctor's always giving you pills for depression and everything else, is because you don't know yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And when you know yourself, you know your limits, you know when you're not feeling comfortable with something, and instead we've been running to the doctor because we're too scared to get to know ourselves. A lot of us are scared to be alone because we don't want to take the time to be intimate with ourselves.
Yes.
The key thing is being intimate with yourself involves you being intimate with God or having some kind of relationship with God.
Yes.
Because everything starts within yourself. Because I always look at people in relationship and relationship jumpers. They jump from relationship to relationship, and they finally attract the same people that they're trying to get away from.
Yes.
And the reason that they do that is because they have not gotten to resolve the issue that they're running from.
Exactly. Can y'all hear Derek? If anybody, if you can respond and let me know if you can hear Derek. We was unable to connect him again live, so I have him on the phone, and I'm hoping that y'all are able to hear him. So if somebody, I don't know, Derek, if you can see, because I can't see who's online. So if you can see people's comments, if y'all can do a thumbs up or give a heart or something to let us know that you can hear Derek as well. And so what Derek is talking about is the myself chapter, which is chapter 3 of The Intimate Place, My God, My Man, Myself. I don't know who in the world is this calling me, but so Derek actually touched on chapter 3 a little bit about creating moments of intimacy and developing eventually a life of intimacy with yourself. Many of us get caught up in doing for our spouses, for our children, for our extended family members, and we tend to forget ourselves. And just as Derek was saying, is that we do end up finding ourselves being unhappy, and we can't quite explain why we're unhappy, but we know that we're unhappy. And so this is why when we develop a consciousness about being intimate, listen, when the husband or the wife is wherever they are and the children are wherever they are and nobody's bothering you, you got to be comfortable with being by yourself. And you also need to take that as an opportunity of saying, hey, this is my me time. What do I want to do? Your average person that, oh, I went to bed because I didn't know what to do with myself. And I have to say, I used to be like that, and I'm still not married, but I used to be like that. However, I've learned to enjoy that me time because for a number of years, I had a husband to attend to. I had 3 children to attend to. I had nieces and nephews that I was helping with. I had a goddaughter who I was helping with. And, you know, I had parents. I had everybody pulling on me. Then I had church pulling on me and never any time for myself. I was so unhappy until I realized that I needed to learn to accept being by myself, but not just accept being by myself, but enjoy being myself, turning it into an intimate moment for myself. And so that's something that I've done. And since I've written the book, I've really gotten gung-ho about learning to create a time of intimacy for myself when nobody else is around, when nobody's calling me. That's your time to say, you know what, this is my time for me to have some intimacy for myself. And this is not just for somebody who's not married. This goes for somebody who's in a relationship, and this goes for somebody who's married. Derek?
I have to agree with you, Nadella, because sometimes even in a marriage, you do still need your me time.
Yes.
One thing I always enjoyed with my wife is that, you know, when I was in the military, she always gave me that 30 to 45-minute time period after coming in from work for time for me.
Yes.
Whether it's me taking a shower and spending time with myself and unwinding from a long day.
Yes.
I think a lot of us have gotten so focused on taking care of other people and other people's needs that we forgot that we still have our own needs.
Exactly.
And so if we are not catering to our own needs and we're always catering to somebody else's needs, then if it's over an extensive period of time, we don't know how to become intimate or to love ourselves. And then we're always complaining or we're always unhappy because you never learned that those people are going to still, whether you do or not do.
Yes.
We have allowed people to become crutches because we do for them and they don't do for themselves because now they feel like out of habit that you have to do it.
Exactly.
And then when that person is gone or moved on because now they've gotten tired of you or they're uncomfortable with you because you don't do the things that you did to get me.
Right.
And that's one of the things that, you know, a lot of relationships break up because people are so comfortable. After a man, you know, the chase is good. I'm just going to put it out there. The chase is good.
Mm-hmm.
Get beginning of the relationship, you're going to do whatever it takes to get that person.
Yes.
But after you get that person, now you done got comfortable. Well, I got him or her, and you slow down.
Yes.
And that becomes a big problem because over time, people get tired of the same old, same old.
Yes.
And so you don't go out, you don't spend time together, you don't spend intimate time going out, having dinner, having a grown-up discussion, you know, talking about church, talking about God, having those subjects or talking about those things that you know intimately.
Why do we need
that
that?
a person could be at a place where that when you lay down at night, your spouse is comfortable.
Yes.
Because they know that they can roll over and you can have pillow talk with that person.
Yes.
But people have gotten so uncomfortable with it that you're scared to have a conversation or communicate with your spouse or your significant other because now you've lost yourself.
Yes.
And you've given them control of you,
Mm-hmm.
and now you want control back but don't know how to get it.
Yes.
And I think the thing is, intimately, you have to start with yourself because you were the person who gave that person control in the first place.
Exactly. Exactly. And, you know, this is, you know, once again, getting back to how do you define intimacy? Is your intimacy or is your time of intimacy or your, when you want to be intimate, is it only wrapped up in someone else? Are you able to create a time or moments of intimacy? Or is it wrapped up in the kids? Is it wrapped up in the husband? Or is it only wrapped up in the wife? Or is it wrapped up in, you know, even as Derek said, you know, you're doing for everybody else? And this is why we need to be able to identify tonight. And I want you to know, please don't be embarrassed that if something we say tonight and you say, oh, that's me, that's what this broadcast is all about, is to bring us once again into a state of consciousness of saying that I need to correct this bad behavior, because until I correct this bad behavior, then I'm always going to be unfulfilled. I'm always going to be unhappy when it comes to being intimate, when it comes to having intimacy. And so if your time of intimacy is always wrapped around other people, then you are unable to have intimacy by yourself. And you know, one of the things that, you know, once again, that I identify in chapter 3 is that, you know, it's okay to be intimate or to have times of intimacy with others. And once again, we're not talking about that sexual intimacy. We're not only talking about your significant other. We're talking about, you know, even having that time with your BFF or your homeboy. You know, if you like to call your mom and chit chat with your mom, that's a time of intimacy. But what about having your own type of intimacy? For those of you who know me, y'all know football is up here. Football is my number one pet peeve, or I should say actually it's tied with sports cars. And so when football season come, y'all will see me blowing up social media talking mucho junk about my teams, because I got 3 winning, you know, or even if they get beat. But I'm still so much engrossed into the football that that's one of my highest times of having intimacy by myself. Now, if you were standing outside my apartment door and one of the games was on, the way that I carry on, you would swear up and down I had other people in my apartment, but it's just me by myself. So I've grown to embrace, to love, and to enjoy creating my own moments of intimacy, whether it's in the presence of others or with this by myself. And let me just share this also, is that you can still have your own time of intimacy while in the presence of others, because intimacy can be experienced either with others or by yourself, but it's all about you. And that's what we have to get to the point of. Even if you are at a family cookout, make that time of intimacy about you, not them. They should be privileged to be part of your time of intimacy, because it's all about you. Derek, what do you have? What you got anything to add?
Well, and I had to learn that everybody is privileged to your time if you allow them.
Yes.
To be a part of your time.
Yes.
I mean, you hit it right on where it should be. Because if you don't want to go and participate or be a part of, and you're allowing people in your space, arbitrarily, when you go out to somebody invite you to a cookout or you have someone come to your house, you're allowing them to come into your space.
Yes.
So if you allow them to come into your space, you can either be a part of them in your space, or you can withdraw yourself for your specific intimate time to yourself.
Yes.
Just because you have a house full of people around you, don't mean that you can't still have intimate time with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can be, for instance, a cookout. I can be on the grill and I'm just singing and enjoying spending time with myself. And I'm being intimate with myself because that's something that makes me happy.
Yes.
But a crowd of people makes other people happy because that's their thing.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing about being intimate with yourself, you also have to learn to be intimate with other people.
Yes.
Because you have to be a listener.
Yes.
You have to be a spiritual advisor.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be a teacher. Sometimes you got to be either a mother, a father, or a sister or brother.
Yes.
Because those people need someone to talk to, and you have to be that person.
Sorry, cuz.
Sometimes you got to be either a mother, father, or the verge of death, on the verge of going out and doing something bad, by just allowing them to come into your intimate space.
Yes.
Because if a person know how you are, they know that when they come to talk to you, they know what they're going to get.
Exactly.
Versus if I go to a total stranger and I tell a stranger all my business, they don't know. I have no clue what that stranger is going to do with the information I just gave them.
Exactly. Exactly.
So and being intimate, you have to. To me, the key to intimacy is developing a relationship.
It is. It is. And, you know, this is where I want us to get. I'm sorry, guys. We are.
Developing a relationship.
It is. I'm sorry. Hold on, Derek. You know, this is where I want us to get. I'm sorry, guys. We are. All right. I'm experiencing technical difficulties here. Hold on, Derek.
But I mean, I really love the topic of intimacy because all week long I've been kind of going and kind of, sampling people's definition of intimacy. And most people I've talked to are quite interested, always reverse intimacy back to relationships, but they also bring up that God is the intimate.
Yes. Hold on one moment. I just need to fix the volume on this. I'm sorry, everybody. Yes. All right, I'm getting some feedback here. Hold on. I'm sorry, everybody. Yes. All right, I'm getting some feedback here. Hold on. All right, can everybody hear me? I hope so. All right, so those of you who's just tuning in, so I want to just reiterate tonight's topic of discussion is how do you define intimacy? I just want to remind you guys and gals that this is an interactive broadcast. Please feel free to post your questions. Please feel free to post comments if you want to share some information, because this broadcast is not a broadcast that I just conjured up just to be having a broadcast, but this is a broadcast that I really desired that would empower us when it comes to intimacy. Many of us have gone through failed relationships. It doesn't matter whether you had one failed relationships or 5,000 failed relationships. what my desire is, and as well as Derek is that we just want to, one, provide an outlet. We also want to be a resource, and my book also to be a resource to those of you who find yourself repeating the same cycle over and over again, and you're wondering why you're not able to be successful in your relationships. And I'm not just talking about your relationships with a significant other, but it also could extend to family members or friends, and even yourself. And as I shared in throughout my book, in chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3, about how when we struggle with ourselves, we are going to struggle in all areas of intimacy. We are going to struggle in all areas of our relationships. And so tonight's topic, once again, is how do you define intimacy? How do you define intimacy? Because until you are able to define intimacy, even if you don't tell me, you have to learn to define intimacy. And as I said in the early part of the broadcast, is that we know in our mind what we want for intimacy, and we know how we feel, but we have yet to be able to express exactly what we want in intimacy. And until you and your significant other have reached a place to where you don't necessarily always have to communicate what type of intimacy you want, but if you're not at that point, you're always going to have miscommunication. He wants to be frisky tonight, and all you want to do is sit on the couch and snuggle or cuddle and watch a series of movies or watch a game or whatever the case may be. When you have those levels of communication, that means that you have not expressed how you define intimacy enough to him, or vice versa to her. So now you're having these issues with miscommunication of what is your understanding of intimacy? How do you define? So when I say how do you define intimacy, what is, one, your understanding of intimacy? Two, what is it? Okay, so let me ask you these questions. So in chapter 1 of The Intimate Place, My God, My Man, Myself, this is one question that I ask you in chapter 1. What do you need and desire in spiritual intimacy with God, your man, and yourself? Not just spiritual intimacy, because in my book, I identify there's spiritual intimacy, mental intimacy, emotional intimacy, verbal intimacy, non-sexual physical intimacy, and then obviously sexual intimacy. So my question is that what do you need and desire in any of those forms of intimacy? So this is what my question is asking. How do you define intimacy? And the only way you can define intimacy is you need to know, you need to be able to identify what are your needs and desire, whether it's spiritual intimacy, emotional, mental, verbal, non-sexual, physical, and sexual physical. You need to be able to do that. And if you have not been able to do that with yourself first, then you're definitely going to have a problem relaying it to your significant other, your family member, or your BFF or your homeboy. Derek? Oops.
I'm here to tell you.
Oh, okay.
I think one of the people I talked to this week specifically, it's funny that he came out and said, you know, a lot of people don't think about it, but intimacy involves all the fruits of the spirit.
Nice.
And if you look at it, it is so true that if you follow the fruits of the spirit, you would understand what intimacy actually means within yourself.
Wow. Okay. See, now he done took that to another level. Okay, go on, tell us some more.
So in saying that, I mean, I myself, you know, I'm a talker. I like to listen, but I like to start up conversations just to see where people actually are.
And I think that's why you and I get along so well. And for those of you, just to let y'all know, Derek and I are also cousins as well. we'll share our testimony one day. But Derek is also my cousin. I tell you, when him and I get on the phone, we get on the phone and we just start jaw jacking. And I mean, our conversations go from one topic to the next, but they're not just empty conversations, but they really are meaningful conversations. I know when we in our conversations, I am a better person. I've gained more knowledge about some things that I didn't know. Let me tell you, this brother right here, this brother knows some stuff. If for those of you, as I humbly say, who think I'm smart, listen, Derek Walker, he's a smart one. Listen, I've learned some stuff from this brother. Go ahead, Derek. Sorry.
That's okay, Nadella. But specifically, I think that a lot of us, we need to take back. We need to start training our males. That's one thing I have to say, because I think it all begins to going back to the beginning and going back to the basics. You know, I think now the younger generation hasn't gotten it. They spend more time in jail. They spend more time out in the streets selling drugs.
Yes.
And it's because they were not taught at home what a real struggle is.
Yes.
And so the real struggle is not going out making money.
Yes.
The real struggle is training your child and keeping your family together.
Yes.
I remember looking at Good Times as a prime example of a family that really didn't have much.
Yes.
But what they did is that they had each other.
Yes, they did.
And a lot of things that we've gone away from is that the family quality is because nobody has time for each other.
Yes.
And I think that if we go back to the basic of home training, and that's saying even I, as a parent, had to learn that, you know, being intimate with myself does not mean that I neglect my family, my wife, or my children.
Right.
And I always tell people, people play the holier than thou game because nobody has time for it. You want to feel holy, but you keep forgetting. And I laughed because remember that play I told you to watch?
Yes. Tell Hell I Ain't Coming.
I encourage a lot of you people to go and look at that play, Tell Hell No I'm Not Coming,
mm-hmm.
because it reflects on a man, a preacher who was still a man, that every time somebody came to him with an issue, he acted like he was holier than thou, that he forgot that he was still a man and he was put in place to help those people.
Mm-hmm.
And so intimately, you are put in a place to help people because people watch and mimic what they see you do.
I agree.
You cannot play church on Sunday and during the week, everybody see everything else that you're doing that's not church.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be who you are 24/7.
Yes.
And I'll tell anybody, I've learned to become intimate with myself.
Yes.
I've even had to say to my own spouse sometimes, you know, everything is not sex.
Yes.
It's not because she wanted it, but the thing is, if I just come and I want to cuddle or hug, it doesn't mean that I'm being sexual. It means I just want to be intimate with you.
Yes.
Because you can tell at any time that if there's something going on with their significant other, they may need that cuddle, they may need that hug, they may need that warm body to just feel like they're being held.
Yes.
And so intimately, it goes back to self, knowing yourself,
mm-hmm.
knowing how to deal with others
mm-hmm.
in dealing with intimacy,
mm-hmm.
and making sure that it's intimacy and not sexually.
Yes, yes.
Because a lot of people befriend people, and what they think is that they're talking to them intimately,
mm-hmm.
and it turns sexual.
Yes, yes.
And that is not, and then you find later on that you jump up and you marry that person, and you found out in the beginning you were not compatible because you have not developed what intimacy really is from the beginning.
Yes. So let me just share something personal about me. Now, I knew my parents loved me, but I did not grow up with parents who hugged us. because what we don't realize is that when you hug your child, is let's start with from a child perspective. Each time you hug that child, you were reaffirming that child of whatever fears they may have had. I grew up in a household where my parents did not hug us that much. And like I said, I knew my parents loved me, but I did not get that affirmation through hugging. And so when I got up to age and started getting into relationships with men, I never wanted them to hug me. Why? Because I was not used to being hugged. And then when they wanted to hug me, my mind immediately said, oh, he must want to have sex with me. And that was not necessarily the case. And so it was hard for me in my first marriage. And I do talk about it in my book, where we ended up getting a divorce because things just was not working out. But I had to come to admit that it was partly due to my upbringing. And so there was times when he wanted to hug me and I thought he just wanted to have sex. So it would turn into a disagreement of sorts, where I'm like, all you want to do is have sex. And that's not what it was. He said, well, all I wanted to do was give you a hug. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I want to encourage you parents, those of you, even if you have grown children, listen, it is not too late for you to start hugging your children, because once again, that hug is reassuring them of something. And so I did not get it. And once again, we're talking about even after I got divorced and I attempted to date and guys wanted to hug me, I was still apprehensive and I was still defensive, saying, I don't want to be hugged, because I did not know anything about being hugged. Every now and then my parents will hug me or give me a little kiss on my forehead, but that was it. And so I struggled in a lot of relationships with men. It wasn't that they wanted to have sex. They just wanted to be affectionate, as Derek even said. All they wanted to do was be intimate by giving me a simple hug. And this is what tonight's once again broadcast is about, is what is your definition of intimacy? How do you define intimacy? Because I didn't have a definition of intimacy. I didn't know how, or I defined intimacy as it was only it equated to sex. I did not know that giving you a hug or giving me a hug was a form of intimacy. I only know now because I wrote the book, or a book on intimacy. And so now I definitely have a much better understanding. So when I see my grandchildren, even when I see my daughter and my sons, even though they're grown, I always give them a hug. And I'm not talking about no little pat hug or what I call an air hug. And no. I grip them. I give them a bear hug. And even my grandson, who's taller than me, I'm like, give me a hug. And he'll give me this little, I'm like, what kind of hug is that? I'm like, no. You need to give me a real hug. And so I would make him not only embrace me, but even as Derek said, I would make him become intimate with his grandmother through a hug. Now, there was nothing sexual about that. And this is what we gotta stay away from, of always thinking anytime there's physical contact that, oh, it's sexual. Ain't nothing sexual between me and my grandson. I don't play that. None whatsoever. But once again, that in me hugging him, not even knowing what was going on with him, I guarantee you I calmed some of his fears down. I guarantee you I reassured him. And so I want to encourage any of you who still have young children, or even if you just have children, every time you see them, I want to challenge and encourage you to hug them. You have grandchildren, hug them. You got nieces and nephews, hug them. Because you're teaching them what non-sexual intimacy is, and then they won't fall into the trap of thinking that the only time they can be intimate with anybody is sexually. Well, that's a problem if you're two women. And I'm saying it, because that's not the natural order of God. I'm not going to get on it any more than that. I'm just going to say that, and I'm not up here to beat nobody up, because I know plenty of people who live that lifestyle, and they're wonderful people. All right. So I don't want to go too much further in that, because I don't want people to get offended and think that's what we're up here doing. No, I'm just sharing with you. There's something about when we do give that hug, there is this time of intimacy that we have, and there's nothing sexual about it. And once again, we are reaffirming, especially with children, that it's okay to hug somebody and not expect them to want to have sex with you. Derek, you have anything to add?
Yes, Bella. One thing I will say is I loved all my kids to the point that I always give them a hug.
Yes.
I don't care when or where. And I had them growing up knowing that it's okay to get a hug from your parent, whether it's your mother or your father, because I would rather them get a hug from me and be able to come and have a discussion with me. They go out there and someone else out in the street, they're having a discussion with somebody else out in the street because they can't talk to me, because I never taught them how to be affectionate. I never taught them that made them feel comfortable with a hug or any type of thing that they can come talk to me. So I encourage everyone, because tomorrow's not promised to you.
That's right.
We in the African American community need to go back and get it right.
Absolutely.
Because we have lost so much. Even though we gained, we have lost.
Yes.
We have lost community.
Yes.
We have lost self-respect.
Yes.
Because we don't respect each other enough to help each other, because we have gotten away from it, that it's me, 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 me.
Yes.
I always refer back to the book, It Takes a Village. But I love Nadella's book because it also goes back to tell you how you need to come back to being intimate.
Yes.
Because if you can go back and become intimate, then you can raise that village.
Yes.
You can make change.
Yes. Yes.
And it starts with us correcting the wrongs.
Yes.
And not keep pacifying the wrongs.
Yes.
If your children know how to love because you love them and you show them how to love, they're not going to settle for just anything and anybody.
Exactly.
And so if they get love at home, and I tell my 9-year-old, I love my 9-year-old unconditionally.
Yes.
But I also tell her that any man that wants to deal with my daughter is going to have to be able to come correct.
Yes.
She's not going to settle for less for a little bit.
Exactly.
But she's going to settle for something that's within her league.
Yes. And that's what, once again, it all goes back to creating a foundation. And many of us, most of us, do not have that foundation. We also have a lot of people who say they grew up in church, but you still did not get that foundation of being intimate with God, because oftentimes in church services, they have these order of services, they have these programs, and they don't like to break away. And so they come in, they do their business, and then they go home. And so, as I had shared, and I will continue to share throughout the broadcast, to remind y'all that the reason why I wrote The Intimate Place, My God, My Man, Myself, is because I recognized that we are broken when it comes to that area. We are lacking, we are deficient when it comes to being intimate, when it comes to intimacy. And so we go to, for those who go to church services, worship services, and you call yourself being intimate with this God you say you know, but yet I've seen people who's supposed to be in their time of intimacy with their God, and I'm saying it like that for a reason, but the least little thing will pull them out of that time of intimacy. And I'm like, God, that's a problem. I said, because if you are really in that place of intimacy, Listen, like I said last week, listen, the church can be on fire. I ain't coming out until we done. And once again, I'm not talking about sexually. I'm talking about spiritual intimacy. I'm not going to just allow anything to pull me out of that zone. And this is why I know that many of us have not and still do not experience real and true intimacy. We are still deficient because the least little thing will bring you out of that zone. When you are really in that zone of intimacy, like I said, listen, everything can blow up around you. You won't know nothing because you're in that zone. And this is where we got to develop in that identifying when you truly are in that intimate place, that you're not going to allow anybody to disrupt that time, whether it's by yourself, whether it's with your significant other, whether it's with God. Nobody comes in between you and your time of intimacy. And so I got to the point to where when I'm in my zone, listen, I'm not answering no phone calls. And I know there was a couple of times my daughter called me and I didn't answer the phone because I was in my zone. And so she's blowing my phone up and blowing my phone up. Guess what? It kept getting blown up until I was ready to come out of my time of intimacy. When I got done, I called her. I said, what is going on? She was like, well, you didn't answer your phone because I was busy. Well, I thought I was going to have to come down there because you wasn't answering your phone. You hear that? You hear the monster that I created and that each of us create? We have created a life with everybody who's connected to us in such a way that if we don't answer our phone, they immediately think, oh, something must be wrong. No, I was in my zone. And so when I started turning people away, if you will, because I was in my zone, all of a sudden, everybody's up in arms and, oh, she's not answering her phone. Because back in the day, I used to answer my phone, one ring, and I'm answering my phone. Now, you'll be lucky if I answer immediately or if I call you back within the day. Because once again, I'm entitled to my time of intimacy. You are entitled to your time of intimacy. Don't you let your mate make you feel guilty. Don't you let your children, your family, your friends, don't you let your job, don't you even let yourself make you feel guilty for deciding I'm going to have this time of intimacy for myself. I used to be guilty. I used to feel guilty. Even I made my own self feel guilty. You may say, what? Because I used to always say, well, I need to be doing this or I need to be doing that for this person or that person. Not no more. When I set aside my time to be in intimacy, listen, I'm not answering the phone for nobody. And once again, let us always keep at the forefront in this broadcast. The purpose of this broadcast also is to get us away from that mindset that anytime we use the word intimate or intimacy, it's automatically sex. Well, excuse me, I don't have a man. So who am I going to have sex with? And I ain't picking up no schmojo. No. So when I say that I'm having my time of intimacy, it's not necessarily that I'm talking sexually because I got some man over here. No, I'm talking about, this is about me. And it could be, once again, in the midst of others, but it's still ultimately about me. And y'all have got to start setting boundaries. If you are going to build a healthy life of intimacy, you're going to have to set some boundaries. If you are married, listen, make sure you communicate with your spouse and say, listen, babe, boo, hun, whatever you call them. I need some time of intimacy for myself. And if they struggle with that, it's okay that they struggle with it at the beginning because this is something new that you've never done before and they obviously don't do. But the more you do it, you are training your mate, you are training your partner, you are training your family and your friends. Oh, wait, Nodella's onto something. Wait, hold on. My wife is onto something. My husband's onto something. I I want to try this out. Derek, you want to finish that up? I don't want to hog.
You know what, Fidela, I like it, and I will tell you why. Because the thing is, like you said, if you started, you have to start within yourself to change, make the change.
Yes.
If you start spending time and desiring time to yourself, to know yourself, then you will fall in suit. And if you start doing it, I promise you, you will enjoy it.
Yes.
Because at any point, it used to be funny because we used to have a joke after my stepfather died with my mother, that we were overprotective about a man coming in. And you know what my mother started allowing me to see?
What?
That my mother had time that my mother has her own spiritual time in the morning.
Yes.
That she spends with herself and God.
Yes.
And during that time, she doesn't answer the phone.
Yes. And
it made me start understanding that sometimes we need to make time for ourselves and tune other people out.
Yes.
Stop making your children feel like they're your husband or your wife.
Yes.
They're your children.
Yes.
And so you have to train them or teach them or reteach them that when your time is your time, it's your time. But you have to go back and start at the beginning to claim your time.
Yes.
Start taking some of that authority and some of that mentality away from the person that you gave it to.
Yes.
And take it and get it back.
Yes.
Because until you reclaim the time that you have for yourself,
yes,
you're going to still be stuck at the same place that you are now.
Yes.
Because you don't understand that giving somebody else your time is giving them your power.
Exactly. 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 And that's what I'm, also saying is that although you have never done it before and your family, they may struggle with it a little bit, but I'm telling you, as Derek said, is that once you start it, watch and see, they're going to say, wait a minute, Derek, why let me give this a try for myself. Next thing you know it, you will no longer have that issue with your partner, with your spouse, but they will not only join you, but then they will also create their own time of intimacy. So then when you say, well, babe, today, from 5 to 7 or, whatever, from 4 to 8 or whatever, this is going to be my time of intimacy. And he's going to be like, oh, that's fine, because I'm going to use that. And that's going to be my time of intimacy as well for me. And so that kills any possible arguments or disagreements that you don't want to spend time with me, or why you spending so much time by yourself, because now you both have discovered your own place of intimacy. And when your children see you doing it individually and collectively, you are now showing them, giving them a great example of what to look for as they are growing up, because subconsciously we are all looking for a mate as we're growing up because of the examples that's before us. So you're going to set a very strong and positive example before your children, before your grandchildren, and even nieces and nephews of, this is the kind of husband that I want when I grow up. This is the kind of wife I want when I grow up. And so there are so many things that transpire in our efforts of creating that time of intimacy for ourselves. And once again, if you have a spouse and your spouse don't understand it at first, listen, keep doing it. Be consistent. Be consistent. Keep doing it, because eventually they're going to be like, I need to create me my time of intimacy. And it's only going to make your marriage, your relationships better. I'm telling you, I can't say from experience because, like I said, I'm not married, but I know. Go ahead, Derek. Well, Derek can speak from experience because he's married.
Nadella, I'll talk from experience.
Okay.
Believe it or not, it works. It works. it keeps arguments down.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps you from going back and forth because they understand it's not that you don't want to be bothered. It's just that at that same time it will avoid an argument. But with that being said, that doesn't mean neglect your spouse or your significant other.
Right. Right. And that's the thing is that it's not about you neglecting each other. It's actually about you taking care of yourself first in order for you to be able to more successfully take care of them. Because listen, if you're broken or, struggling or whatever the case may be, you're going to struggle in trying to do for them. I mean, let's look at it truthfully. We have a lot of people that are married and one or both of them are broken. And so they're both struggling, trying to take care of each other while they're broken. And that don't work successfully. What we need to do is identify within ourselves. This is why I asked the question, how do you define intimacy? Not how your mate define intimacy, not how your friend define intimacy or a family member or anybody. How do you define intimacy? You need to know for yourself in order to be able to express it and share it with others. If you don't know, then there's a disconnect. And I believe, Derek, you talked about that a little while ago. There's a disconnect when you cannot define what intimacy is to you. Yeah, your husband may have defined it, but you need to define it for yourself. Your wife may have defined it, but you need to define it for yourself. You need to know really what type of intimacy you like. And once again, we're not talking about just the sexual intimacy. We're talking about all forms of intimacy, because in my book, also in chapter 1, I talk about how they are all connected. When you are lacking in 1, 2, or 3 of the types of intimacies, it puts a strain on the other 2 that are not lacking. So we got to make sure that all forms of intimacy in our life are healthy, because if they're not all healthy, and where they're not healthy, we should be working to get them healthy. We should be working to make sure that they're balanced with the others. And when we don't, it puts a strain not only on you as an individual, but any relationships that you have. Derek, what do you got to say on that? And we're going to come to a close in a few minutes.
And you're so right. I mean, I always say that it's a difference between having sex and making love.
Yes.
And I will touch on the sexual aspect for a minute, because I think a lot of people think that this broadcast is specifically about telling you don't do it.
Right.
What we're telling you is it's a way to do it to a point that it's enjoyable, but it's fulfillable also.
Yes.
And so the thing is that if I'm not the whole person, then you're having sex with a piece of person, or
yes.
a broken person.
Yes.
And a broken person is not satisfied nor happy.
Yes.
And so you would rather deal with a happy person, and that person would enjoy being intimate with you sexually and mentally.
Yes. Emotionally.
And that's the key thing, that you need to be evenly yoked.
Yes.
If one person is broken and the other person has it together, then you're not evenly yoked.
Exactly. Yes.
And so you have to either bring that person up to par where you are, or assist them.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean that everybody's going to be willing to go with you.
Yes.
But that tells you where their mindset is.
And I talk about that in chapter 2, Derek. And the song, just quickly, the song that pops in my mind when you talked about that is, and I know those of you who are online should, if you're old enough, will remember the song, "Your body's here with me, but your mind is on the other side of town." Who remember that song?
I remember it, because that was actually one of the OJ's best songs.
Yes. Yes.
And it meant something. And that's what. And see, I like that, Nadella, because we're not just so spiritual that we haven't forgotten where we came from.
Oh, not at all.
And that's the key thing people need to understand. We're human just like you are.
Exactly. Exactly.
We experience just like you are.
Yes.
We have needs and wants just like you are.
Yes.
But we have to learn to first take care of self.
Exactly. Yes.
Because if you can't take care of self, you can't take care of nobody else. I used to love that saying, you have to love yourself.
Yes. Yes.
And until you love yourself, you won't understand or know how to love anybody else.
I agree.
And that's why I brought back the issue about parents showing your children love.
Yes.
Because they don't know how to love themselves, and they've gone to settling. Even women having babies from men that are no good.
And you know what, Derek, that thought came across my mind way earlier. So go on ahead and talk about it.
And so, I mean, you know the man ain't no good.
Yes.
But because you feel like he can fulfill your needs sexually, and then he goes out there and he goes and has 3 other babies by some other 3 women.
Yes.
And your child is lacking because now he has to provide for 4 children.
Yes. Yes.
But he was never yours anyway because you settled for that type of man.
Exactly.
And so ultimately, he's not yours and he's not theirs.
Yes.
And we have, and I will say this, I'm a man. We as individuals, women have allowed so many men to get off the hook.
Yes.
Because we're settling.
Yes.
My mother and my family used to always tell me, if he good enough for you to lay with, he good enough for you to marry.
And that's something that I live by. And I've been telling brothers and sisters, I'm like, listen, so I'm going to even take it to a step further, is that if I'm good enough for you to live with, then I'm good enough for you to marry. You don't mind living together, or as we call shacking, but you don't want to marry me? How is it that I'm good enough to live with, but you don't want to marry me? No.
And that's the crazy part, Nadella, because a lot of people have gotten to that scenario. Why buy the cow when I can get the milk for free?
Exactly.
And so your flavor of milk ain't everybody's flavor of milk.
Yes. Yes.
And he or she can get milk from any place else.
Exactly.
But we have allowed so many times for people to just up and leave.
Mm-hmm.
Because we knew what we were getting into in the beginning. And then we are left with all these separate kids with different daddies.
Yes.
And they don't know what it is because you allowed your home to be broken.
Yes.
You've allowed yourself to be broken.
Yes.
Because now you've allowed yourself to become less than, because you have not given yourself a chance to get to your full potential.
Yes.
Whether it's a high school diploma.
And it was all in search of intimacy. And all of what you are saying, Derek, sorry to cut you out, I just want to put this in, is all of what you're saying is because we were in search of intimacy. And this is why this broadcast is centered around, how do you define intimacy? Because once you are able to define intimacy, you're not going to be taken up with any joker on the street. And I'm talking about male and female, because you got some women out there who just as bad as men. And we all have been in search of intimacy unconsciously, and we got caught up in a bad relationship, but we settled because we figured, well, this is the best that I could do. But when you have come into the understanding and you're able to define what you want in intimacy, you say, you know what, I'm going to sit on the dock of the bay and I'll wait. I'm not going to sell myself short. And you shared that, Derek. Yes.
And I'm going to end with this, Nadella. I'm going to give you an experience that I've learned. When you settle, then something's wrong.
Yes.
Because I tell people, I got out of the military in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had probably about 5 or 6 different jobs, but it was not because I didn't like the people.
Right.
It was because I wanted more.
Yes.
I tell my wife every day that if I can provide more and I can give more, then I want to do that because that's a standard that I'm setting for my family.
Yes.
I'm setting for my daughter because why settle for a high school diploma when you can get a high school degree?
Exactly.
Degree?
Yes.
Why settle? And I always tell you, especially for the African American community, I so strongly feel this. We have gotten to a point where we have settled for being high school dropout.
Yes.
Elementary school dropout.
Yes.
And the standards have gotten so high that we can't even survive.
Exactly. Yes.
And it used to be funny that when the white people would get a degree, they were the best thing since a slice of bread.
Yes. Yes.
When we started becoming equal to them, the standards changed.
Yes.
And it's because somebody woke up and said, you know what, I'm not going to settle, but I'm going to become intimate with myself.
Yes.
That I'm going to become successful.
Yes.
I'm going to focus on me.
See, now you done took that to another level, but go ahead.
So when you start focusing on yourself,
yes,
and enjoying yourself and wanting more for yourself, anybody that comes within your circle, if they're going to give you less, you're not going to want to be associated with them.
Yes, 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 yes. You're absolutely right. And you also brought another depth to this conversation about being intimate with yourself, because to be intimate with yourself is also a form of success. And that success can expand to any, or should I even say it should expand to every area in your life. Not, once again, not just one area, but it should expand to every area of your life. If you are successful, let's say you are successful as an entrepreneur, as a businesswoman, or as a businessman, then you should also be successful in your relationships. You should be successful in every area of your life. We got to stop robbing ourselves of thinking, well, because I'm successful in this one area, and we stop. And we take great pride, which you should. But what about expanding that mindset to, well, since I'm successful in this, then I can be successful in that. I can be successful in that. I can be successful in that. But we tend to settle and we rejoice. Once again, it's good to rejoice and be happy that you succeeded at one thing, but we stop. And we're still finding ourselves unfulfilled. Because as Derek pointed out, is that intimacy, if you're successful in one area, when it comes to intimacy, it should span across everything in your life. It should affect everybody that's in your life, everybody that's attached to you, anybody who comes around you. That's my personal opinion. And so tonight, I want y'all to take away this question. And I want you to, off the air, I want you to sit down and ask yourself, how do I define intimacy? You need to sit down and write, how do I define intimacy? If you have a significant other, if you have a spouse, ask them to do this assignment with you. Ask them, would you sit down and write down how you define intimacy? And I'm going to sit down and write how I define intimacy. It doesn't have to be at the same time, but I don't want you, as Derek even pointed out, I don't want you to end up being unequally yoked, that now that you've identified how you define intimacy, don't leave your partner behind. Get your partner involved. If at first they don't want to take part in it, don't worry about it. Keep doing what you need to do. But every so often, invite them and say, if they haven't answered that question, invite them again and say, would you please take the time and write down how you define intimacy? And once you get your partner, your spouse, to sit down and write how they define intimacy, then have a discussion. Share your thoughts. Well, this is how I identify intimacy. They will say, well, this is how I identify intimacy. And I guarantee you, if y'all are experiencing some difficulties, or you feel that your relationship is not where you would like for it to be, I guarantee you, when you answer that question, it'll shed some light and you'll be like, okay. So then once you are able to further identify what each of your perspectives are, or what your definition is, what your understanding is of intimacy, then you two need to create a plan of what will work so that you can create an even better life together and a stronger life of intimacy. All right. So this is what I'm asking y'all to do, is write down tonight's question. How do you define intimacy? What is your understanding of intimacy? What is your definition of intimacy? And if those of you who are single, it's extremely important that you definitely answer this question as well, because before you get into your next relationship, you will be good to go and you will know whether you need to tell him or her to go. Because if they're not able to, pretty much from the beginning, you'll know whether they're able to meet that, your Derek, help me out. You'll know whether they will be able to meet you or fulfill, yes, okay. You'll know whether they
fulfill your needs, not sexually, but
yes,
be evenly balanced.
Yes, yes.
Because that person is going to be there. You know that they're going to be there to help you.
Yes.
You know that they're not there just for you to, for them to leech.
Exactly. Exactly.
We need balance.
Exactly.
You need balance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And once you get balance, I promise you, the divorce rate in the African American communities will lower.
I agree. 1,000, 1 billion, 1 trillion, gazillion %. And I believe, yes.
I promise you, your children will know how to love.
Yes.
Know how to not settle for just any woman or any man.
Yes.
But know that they're not going out there making babies and moving on.
Exactly.
We need to take back our community.
Yes.
We need to take back our people.
Yes.
We need to teach people how to become intimate.
Yes.
Without involving sex.
Yes.
But just balance. And until we can do that, we're lost.
Yes. And we're going to continue to struggle.
And it starts with each of us teaching.
Yes.
Everybody's a teacher, whether you believe it or not.
Yes.
And so it's time for us to start teaching. Even if you don't know how to teach, share this broadcast with someone that you know is struggling.
Yes.
Show this broadcast to somebody who's in the middle of an unhappy relationship or a failing relationship.
Mm-hmm.
The words that were said in this particular broadcast tonight will get you to understand that maybe you need to have a conversation.
Yes.
Maybe you can get your marriage, your relationship back on track.
Yes.
By just sitting down and communicating with each other.
Exactly. Exactly. And we know communication is key in any relationship. All relationships, communication is definitely key. So I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in to Intimate Talk Live broadcast with your hosts, Nodella Jordan and Derek Walker. If you're just tuning in, I want to encourage you to give the broadcast about 20 minutes to finish processing and go back and watch the replay, because you may definitely find some answers to questions that you've had that you may not be able to ask right now, but also you can post your questions and one of us will definitely get back to you with an answer as quickly as we are able to. But once again, I'm going to leave with you tonight two things. If you don't have my book, The Intimate Place, My God, My Man, Myself, it is on sale this week at 50% off. The book normally is $9.99 and it is on sale for $5. The link to my website is in the broadcast, so you can go directly to the website and place your order today. If you don't want to order it from my website, it is available at Amazon. I think it's still available at Barnes & Noble and a couple of other places, but it's not on sale. This is my own personal sale. So the 50% off is not available online at my retailers. It's only available online at 50% off at my website, which is www.n as in Nodella, S as in Sacagawea, J as in Jordan, ministries.com, nsjministries.com. And I'm telling you, you're going to enjoy this book. It's not a really long book. See how thin it is? Because I didn't want to drag out what I wanted to convey to my readers. I really had just wanted to get into the crux of it and get to the point as to why I'm writing the book. I have been asked by a number of people if there's going to be a part two. There may be a part two, even though it's been almost 5 years since I've released this one. I still may end up doing a part two now that I got a new co-host. We may end up writing a part two or some kind of a offset to this, based on the people's asking us, are you going to write another book? And I do actually have another book that's separate from the broadcast that's called Sassy, The Perfect Life. That is also available on my website. So who knows what the future holds for us. But once again, I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in to Intimate Talk live broadcast. Join us next week for another discussion. And once again, you can leave your comments. You can still post your comments even after the broadcast ends, and one of us will definitely respond to you, or you can inbox either one of us. All right, so you can inbox me either at the Author's Corner, or you can inbox us directly at Nodella Jordan or Derek Walker. And Derek is D-E-R-I-C-K, right, Derek?
That's correct.
All right, and his last name is Walker, W-A-L-K-E-R. So feel free to reach out to us. And once again, we thank you so much for tuning in tonight. We hope you enjoyed the broadcast and watch last week's replay as well. You will definitely get some really good information. Have a good night and see you next time.